Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Gemma Howell. I'm a computer scientist at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I focus on mobile device security for organizations. I've also, a little bit more about my background is that I've also worked with first responders who are considering using mobile devices or IoT devices for their public safety duties, as well as election security work. I write standards and guidance for securing our election systems. Fun stuff, but today we're here to talk about managing the mobile endpoint attack surface. And just to clarify for folks who are here and for folks who just walked in, when I say mobile, I'm talking about mobile phones. Anything with a mobile operating system, iOS, Android, so phones, tablets, Chromebooks, not automobiles, where I'm not talking about the mobility of devices like laptops, or just mobility of being able to work from different locations. Just wanted to clarify that, just in case you might be in the wrong location, and to give you a heads up of what we're gonna talk about here today. So now that that's cleared up, like I said, I'm a mobile device security specialist who loves her phone. I live by it, as we all do. Some of you might be on your phones now. I don't blame you. You're probably checking on your flight home. Who flew in? Who flew in to, okay, very cool, almost everyone. Who flew in from out of the country? Oh yeah, welcome, awesome, awesome. So we're all familiar with the flight home or just being in the airport all together. You're sitting there, you're waiting for your flight, and you've got like a few minutes before you board. You're trying to check your emails and text messages before you're restricted to that sometimes working Wi-Fi on the airplane, and you gotta watch their movies or whatever you downloaded on Netflix. So you're checking your phone, you're checking your emails. You might get an email from your job that says, hey, we're having some issues with your account. We need you to log in and address the issue. Or maybe you got a text message about an Amazon package that you think you ordered, and they just need you to click on this link and then, just provide some additional information so you can get that package, because if you want it on time, you gotta go through this process. Or maybe that one restaurant that you were trying to go to, they sent you a discount code and they're like, hey, you can book your reservation right now. All we need is your credit card information. And so of course you put it in. You've been trying to get into this restaurant for months, and you give all your information up. Next thing you know, this is you. You've been phished. You've given your work credentials away to the wrong person. You gave too much personal information because you thought you were giving information to get that Amazon package, and now someone has your credit card information, and now they're getting gas in a state that you don't even live in. So this could happen to anyone, right? Some of us have already been phished. We know phishing is very popular. Yes, this is another phishing story because it could happen to anyone on any device, including your mobile device. And it can not only impact you personally, but it could also potentially impact your organization as well if you're using your device for work at the same time. And so what we're here to talk about today is how to manage risks like this on your device. So why use your phone for work? Why not? Everybody's doing it. We all have a phone. We can use our device to access information from anywhere. It's flexible, it can go in our pocket. We can take pictures of this cool presentation to share with our job later. And so why not? Most jobs support the use of your mobile device for work. As with any technology, it can come with risks though. One thing I want to talk about is the two most common deployment scenarios for a mobile phone. So we've got corporate owned, sometimes personally enabled, but typically personally enabled with some personal capabilities. This is the two-phone scenario. So you got the double phones, you're carrying two phones, you got to keep track of both. BYOD, this is where all of the information is all in one place. You're a one-phoner, which a lot of us would love, but we definitely understand there's some potential risks there, right? Because we have all of our information all in one place. And we have to find that balance between having our work and personal all on one phone. So this is a brief review and outline of what we're going to be talking about today. And the wheel on the side is the path that's going to guide us through this discussion. So understanding the different layers of a mobile device, understanding some potential cybersecurity and privacy risks to mobile devices, how to identify and mitigate those threats, while also taking into consideration privacy concerns. Sometimes we forget about the privacy side of things until it really impacts us personally, especially when we're doing a BYOD scenario. And then improving your mobile risk management posture, and then some next steps that you can take. Here we are, going down our path, and we've hit the mobile layers. What are the layers of a mobile device? Why am I talking about this? This is because you can't protect your attack surface if you don't know what surface can be attacked. So my goal here is to give you a little bit of information about what all you can find in the different components and layers of a mobile device. There's a lot under the hood, starting with the hardware, the physical phone itself. This is where you'll find the application processors, all of your chips, your baseband processor, maybe your hardware security modules to handle cryptographic functions, and then even your peripherals, the camera, SIM, microphone, all built in under the hood of the mobile device. Next up, firmware, similar to traditional computers, traditional computers and laptops, your initialization code, your bootloader, checking the integrity of your device, as well as device drivers. Next up, your operating system. Your kernel, application sandbox, each app is individually sandboxed and prevented from interacting with each other unless they have specific APIs that allows them to access them, media, and runtime, your runtime environment itself. And then the applications. This is what we all love. There are thousands of applications on our phone, unless you've gotten good at filtering and organizing your phone. These are your third-party libraries. They handle all the data transmissions. They're asking for different permissions to different things on your device. They want to access your microphone, your camera, for things like social media and things like that. So that is all rolled up into your mobile device. And there's more, right? I just touched on some of the core things, but there are so many components within your phone. All of your network services, cellular, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, global positioning system, helps us with navigation because we miss MapQuest so much. Biometric authentication, allowing us to access and authenticate to different apps and things like that, and different sensors on our device, the pedometer, because we all want to track those steps, right? And so now we have an understanding of the device itself and what's all within it, but what are some potential risks? I want to talk about cybersecurity risks and privacy risks. A lot of times they intersect when you think about a data breach that might leak some personal information, but they are still two distinct areas, and so I want to make sure I talk about some of the differences there. So cybersecurity risks, there we're thinking about different incidents that can cause a loss of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. I know a lot of us are very familiar with that. A security risk can put a mobile device or systems that connect to a mobile device at risk of losing something within the CIA triad. On the privacy side, now the privacy risk, that's the likelihood and impact of that an individual might experience problems, and that those problems would arise from data processing. And so on a mobile devices put individuals at risk of having an issue with the processing of data, and that could happen in many ways, especially because we hold mobile phones so close to us and we use it to store a lot of our personal information. So going back to security threats and security risks, here are just a few examples. This is lost or stolen phone, very common, could definitely happen. That if your phone is lost, you could easily lose access to the information. You lose availability to the data on your phone. Phishing attacks, same thing. These social engineered to give up your credentials. Now you've lost access to the data on your phone. Now they could also make modifications to your phone or the information on your phone, and even deny access to you on your device. Malicious apps and outdated phones. Malicious apps can add malware to your device. And outdated phones, if you don't update your phone and address some of the known potential vulnerabilities to the device and get those security patches in, that could impact all levels of the CIA triad. And these are just a few. And so you might be thinking, well, okay, as an organization, how do I know that I've captured all the threats? How do I know what threats are out there? Should I just search and search and search on the internet? Well, have no fear. The Mobile Threat Catalog is here. This is Captain MTC, and a little bit about the Mobile Threat Catalog. So it's a repository that contains threats to mobile devices listed specifically under some of those layers that we talked about earlier. So there's a section on application threats, there's a section on cellular threats, and here we describe each threat. We give references to real examples where some of these threats may have occurred, as well as identified related CVEs and some potential mitigations for these threats. The catalog is meant to be a living document built off of the public's feedback and input on current threats that are in there, but also new threats that are out there as well. And so we certainly encourage you to take a look. If you have input on threats that are there, or threats that you want to share with us, you would find those there. Okay, now let's talk more about privacy. I'm certainly not the privacy expert, but I've learned a lot through some of my work on mobile device security and privacy about the different areas and the impact to individuals who want to use their phone for work. Here, you'll see these three, and this is the CIA, or the confidentiality, integrity, availability for privacy. And the goal here is that you use these privacy engineering objectives to build into your systems when you're trying to improve the security posture of the privacy posture of your system setup. You want to take these three into consideration, and I have links there to more information about these three. Another thing I want to talk about are these problematic data actions, or PDAs. They have on the privacy side, they have their own catalog. And what problematic data actions are, these are problems that can occur due to problems that can occur for individuals due to some type of system or security data processing setup. And so the catalog itself is a non-exhaustive list, and these are a few of them here, and we'll talk a little bit more about these in relation to some privacy risks on the next slide here. So in the mobile context, when you're thinking of what's a potential privacy risk, a lot of times organizations can hook right into your phone. They'll have access when you're using your phone for work. Sometimes they need that ability to see, okay, this phone is not in compliance. I'm concerned that there's a potential risk. I'm gonna wipe the device, remove the information from the device so that any potential attacker doesn't have access to it. If it's on your personal device in a BYOD scenario and they decide to wipe it, they could potentially wipe your personal information as well. And that could lead to the problematic data action, or PDA, of unwarranted restriction, where now you don't have access to your personal information because they performed the device wipe. Employee unawareness of organizations' policies could cause induced disclosure and appropriation, and that is where you may be giving up some of your privacy because you gotta use your phone for work. You need to get your work done. You gotta get money to survive. And so in order for you to achieve your work mission, you have to do what you need to do your job. And that might require you to give up some of your private information. And it could also be because you're just not familiar with all of the organization's policies as well. Device surveillance, if you're using your device for work, they may have access to your location, and they may be able to see where you're going at all times. And that could lead to the feeling of surveillance, but also the potential for your organization to make judgments about you. Surveillance is not only location, it could also be just looking at the apps, the personal apps that you have on your device, and making assumptions about you as a person. And you could be surveilled if they're monitoring the different types of apps that are on your phone. And then invasive applications. I think I might have touched on this earlier, but these are applications that may be asking for excessive permissions and things like that. And so, or just have some type of malware built into it, and that could lead to unanticipated revelation of your personal information. If you find out that an application is insecure, that could lead to that loss of trust with the organization if they were encouraging the use of a specific app. So now we know about a few potential threats and risks that are out there for mobile devices. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how to identify and mitigate those. Why do we care? I saw a talk on Monday that was about the last frontier, employee personal security and privacy. And they mentioned how could we expect us as humans to do so much as far as like putting in the security to your device when we have to worry about our work life, our personal life, our health, and we have to toggle on all 50 settings to make sure our Google account is secure. And so a lot of times, unintentionally, it is human error. And so, or maybe it's, unawareness of the cybersecurity guidelines, and so you're accidentally ignoring them. Maybe you've lost your phone, which again, I say is a common thing that happens. You lose your work phone. And that last stat there, 86% of IT managers say mobile attacks are growing more frequent. That's why this is so important, because making sure that you and your organization are building in the security into your infrastructure and doing what you can on your side. There's still some things that just have to be handled on the personal user side, but if you can harden on your end, then that can help reduce a lot of the risk and potential attacks. So I want to talk a little bit through how to manage those risks and things to think about and maybe to do that. So what's your use case? How and why are you using your phone? Which deployment scenario are you using? Who is a two-phoner? You've got work phone and personal phone. Okay, your pockets are heavy. BYOD out there? All on one device? Awesome, very cool. So it's important to know that, right? Because that informs your threat modeling later when you're trying to understand what specific threats to be worried about. But before you even get to that, you have to really hone in on how and why you're using your device. When working with first responders are really focused on the availability of their information. If they don't have access to their information while they're at an emergency incident and they have to do some two-factor authentication that requires them to reach in their pocket and pull out something else, they don't have time for that. And so you really have to hone in on the use case and everything that goes into how they're going to be using the devices to make sure you understand that before you get into identifying the risks and applying the security behind everything. After that, you might want to look into the cybersecurity framework to kind of think about your cybersecurity goals and where you want to go. Here you'll see 5 functions. If you're familiar with the cybersecurity framework, you'll know that the 2.0 draft is out, and so there's an additional function that's not here, govern. But overall, using the framework to kind of think through where you want to be and the specific outcomes that you want, you could develop something like a profile, and a profile can be used to identify where you are right now, and it can also be used to set a target goal of where you want to be as an organization, and you can narrow that specifically to a mobile deployment scenario. In the documentation for the cybersecurity framework, you can see more information about that, and also I'll share some additional resources at the end. But the cybersecurity framework, and using it to develop these profiles, can help create a common language for you and your organization to use when talking about your goals and where you want to be as far as your cybersecurity posture. And this is important, even though cybersecurity is in the name, this is not just for your engineers or your CISOs. You really want to make sure everyone's involved in the conversation because of that use case part. The use cases, whatever your business objectives are, that's important because that's what feeds into a lot of the discussions here. On the privacy side, it's the same thing. They have 5 functions here, and the framework itself can be used to develop profiles to identify on the privacy side. What are your organizational goals? How are you aligning with legal and regulatory requirements? Oops, sorry, went a little bit too far. And how are you addressing the privacy needs of the individuals? And so you know your use case. You know where you want to be. You know what you're trying to achieve, the outcomes that you want, and again, on the security and privacy realm. Now you're kind of reflecting, looking at where you are, and maybe you've noticed there are some holes. You see some gaps in your current infrastructure. This here is an example that we developed in the lab where an example organization found some gaps, and they were interested in using their devices for a BYOD deployment. They noticed there was no separation, so that device wipe that I was talking about earlier would wipe their whole device. And so they wanted to address some of the concerns there. And then they took the next step. They were like, okay, I saw some holes, but how do I make sure I have good coverage? And so the next step that they took was, okay, we need to do a security risk assessment. We need to understand the different threats. They referenced this mobile threat catalog that's out there. But they identified vulnerabilities, looked at the likelihood and impact, and then determined the risk. They referenced 830, this special publication 830, but they kind of did it in their own way. And here's an example of what came out of that risk assessment. So we have the threat event that they found was a potential risk. They saw, looked at the likelihood around it, put some just a really thought into why is this Why is this a specific threat for this? The level of impact was high. They had thought about the justification around that, and this was specific to the BYOD space. And so they made sure that, okay, is this threat really a specific issue for BYOD and why? So now they know, this fictional organization knew that, okay, we have these specific risks that we want to address. We've already found some holes. We know what we're doing. How do we fix it? And so they looked into these different technologies and they developed an architecture that would address those security risks that they found. And this is a picture of that example architecture, and it highlights some of the technologies that they used. What are they and what do they do? Let me tell you. So here's a list of a few of the things that we have had in the example architecture. Enterprise Mobility Management Solution, also known as mobile device management, could also be called unified endpoint management if it's all rolled into one. But this is where they were enforcing policies, checking for compliance, and performing compliance actions on the device if it was out of compliance. Mobile application vetting, they were analyzing the apps that either they were going to use, that they wanted to push to the device, and these check the applications for their security and privacy risk posture. Are there any concerns? Is this sending unencrypted traffic? Where is it going? And those reports highlighted that. Data isolation and separation, they leveraged that on the device, separating the work information from the personal information on the device. So if they needed to do that wipe, the personal information was safe. Mobile threat defense, constant monitoring of the device for any potential device-based, network, or application-based attacks. Trusted execution environment, built into a lot of our devices now, that handles a lot of things in the background and different security and privacy features and functions. And then a virtual private network just to handle secure remote communications. And so they had this architecture, they had their list of threats. Now they're like, okay, let's make sure we've addressed everything and let's make sure we understand how. And so they have the threat events. Each threat event that they identified, especially those ones, these three here were high risk, high impact. They looked at the example solution, made sure they addressed that threat, and they made sure they were aware of what technology within the solution addressed the specific threat. So that's it, right? So now we've addressed everything. We fixed it all. No, we forgot about privacy. We set up this architecture to address all of the security, but there's also the privacy side. And so the privacy risk assessment methodology is something that's out there, and it talks about the problematic data actions. Remember those data actions that cause adverse effects for individuals. And we used a variation of that. We didn't, for our group, we didn't go into too much detail as an organization might, but we certainly referenced these worksheets that are out there. And you might be wondering why we didn't do this earlier. Why didn't we do this while we were doing the security risk assessment? Well, that's because the privacy aspect is really based on the system design. If you'll see worksheet 2, you want to analyze your current system. You need to know where the information is going and what is sending what information, what has access to what information. And so your system really has to be established. And so similar to what we did for the security risks, we have the privacy risks where we identified several potential high impact privacy risks. We identified what the data action is that has to happen and what's the potential problematic data action that could result from that. So this one here specifically is talking about the surveillance that we discussed earlier. And we highlighted some potential problems for the individuals, for the organization to be thinking about and taking into consideration. Same thing, what are the privacy risks? What's the problematic data action? How is this resolved in the current solution? How is this addressed? And what technology is doing that? What technology is addressing maybe a specific privacy risk if it's tailored to a specific section of an architecture? Now everything has been fixed. Now we've looked at the security. We didn't forget about the privacy. We've thought about the individuals and the employees, because any impact to the individuals and employees could certainly impact the organization in a negative way. If you're thinking about reputation and just being able to do your work. And so what are some next steps? Depending on what you do or where you are, if you're a mobile administrator, or if maybe you're just thinking about how your organization is using mobile devices, you want to understand what your current implementation is. How are you currently using those devices? Do you have any concerns or issues with the current deployment option? Are you okay with BYOD? Have I scared you a little bit? In the first 3 months, maybe you're looking at some of the potential cybersecurity and privacy risks that could impact your mobile device implementation. Analyze how you're applying the security technologies to manage those risks, and then from there, if you see that you might need some improvement in certain areas, maybe take the time to go through that process that we've kind of walked through and do what you need to improve the management of the mobile endpoint attack surface. Throwing my title in there. And if you're looking for guidance on what that might look like or how to do that, these are 2 practice guides that we have out there, free, publicly available online. One focused on corporate-owned, personally enabled for the 2-phone folks, and then BYOD, which is currently in draft and being finalized. But those are both out there, and they walk through those steps that we talked about here today, walked through that path of defining the use case specific to that the example, addressing the risk, looking at the different threats and risks, understanding the mobile device, identifying and mitigating those risks, improving that security posture, building that architecture to really address the risks that were identified, and then keeping it going, having a plan for continuing to address those risks in the end. So now we look like this all the time and not the concerned gentleman earlier. So now our phones are secure, everything's all good. Security and privacy addressed, done. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to chat. I think I left plenty of time for questions, I think. You can, but also feel free to email me at mobile-nccoe@nist.gov. And the second link there is a link to our mobile device security website where you can find the resources that I mentioned earlier. Thank you. Any questions? I think I must have went well. I must have answered all the questions. But again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Feel free to email me or find me on LinkedIn. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.